All right, so good morning. I want to welcome everybody. My name is David Gutierrez. I am the Adobe Ambassador and Learning Technology Specialist here in the library, working with the Innovation Foundry. Very grateful for Dr. Weaver and the library for allowing us to host Creative View this week. So I hope some of you have taken part in the things that we had, maybe the headshots or the Maker Lab projects. This afternoon we have another session in the Hunter Welcome Center. All of that information for that can be found at acu.edu/Adobe. I want to thank y'all for coming because I'm really grateful that we have Jordan Bunch joining us this week. Jordan is a former ACU student who graduated in 2009. And did you do a master's as well? And then you did a master's in global services.
It was actually called missions at the time.
Okay, yeah. So that was before names changed for these programs. I think they're still changing. I'm not sure. But Jordan is a filmmaker in Austin, and interesting thing, and I actually reminded Jordan about this. The first wedding video that I ever shot or helped shoot was with Jordan here in Abilene. And I have a photography book of yours, wedding photography book, in a box somewhere that I've been meaning to find. But Jordan has been a great part of the photography community here in Abilene, and a part of a lot of work with house churches here in Abilene, as well as Austin as well. So we're grateful to have him here. We're going to start off by showing a film that Jordan made, his team produced, to tell the story of Dr. Tony Dale, who we'll get to hear from here in a little bit.
Changing the healthcare industry is a lofty goal for a family doctor, but Tony Dale is doing just that. His company, the Caris Group, handles medical bill negotiations for over 1 million people. His passion is taking his Christian faith and actively applying these truths to the medical economic world. His new company, Sedera Health, is taking principles learned from Christian healthcare sharing co-ops and applying them to secular businesses, revolutionizing the way that companies offer healthcare to their employees.
Today I'm picking up my good friend Tony Dale. Tony's from England, so I had to pick up my friend Jimbo's 2006 Jaguar XJ Supercharged V8 Portfolio Edition. The Portfolio Edition is one of 140 like it that were made, but this car, while we're driving in the front seat today, was really meant to be driven around by your chauffeur while you sit in the lap of luxury in the back seat. The carpets have lamb's wool. There's tray tables that fold down so you can set your bubbly on it. And the center console controls everything up here in the front so that you can tell Cadbury what happens on the radio and the climate control with the push of a button. You can't drive this car without feeling fancy, so I had to class it up a little bit today. I'm not a fan of tea, but I feel like I have to have some today while I'm driving this thing around. Crumpets, anyone? Tony, we've gotten to know each other over the last probably 8 or 9 years at some capacity. So one of the things I think is most interesting about you, the move from England to Austin, Texas. So I got to start with that story.
Well, we've been blessed with an amazing life. When I say we, obviously, I mean my wife and I. We came over to Texas in late October of 1987. The weekend before we were due to fly, we were there, you know, as part of the church that we belonged to at that time. And someone shared, rather as I've described before, that they felt like there was something God had put on their hearts for us to be aware of. In what they shared, they said there are going to be some major storms in your life, and it's going to take a long time before you understand why you're there. We arrive in the States with, our 4 kids and 12 of the biggest boxes that the airline will allow us to put on, so we're moving everything we can because we know we're going to be there for a while. We assumed we would be pioneering this work among doctors. We just fell flat on our face. I mean, year after year, we got nowhere. We had some difficult years. I did everything from selling in flea markets to door to, trying to get any job I could, but nobody would hire, a doctor with my sort of background, who's overqualified for sort of anything except medical work.
So talk to me about the transition from like traveling door-to-door salesman and all the other odd jobs to what you're doing now. How did that get started?
Well, by the end of the 9 years I just described, we were so sort of unclear what we were supposed to be and really frustrated and confused. We just sort of agreed together, Felicity and I, that we were giving God an ultimatum, that either he sorted out with real clarity what we were here for, or we were going back to England. Well, some very interesting things happened. I injured myself playing basketball with the kids. Needed very simple knee surgery. The surgeon told me it was going to cost a couple of $1,000s. Everything went great until the bills started coming. But I was so ignorant about the way the American medical system worked, I didn't realize that I'd still get bills from the hospital, the anesthetist, you name it, everybody who could figure out an excuse for billing us.
Sure, yeah.
And $14,500 later, this is 1996, so in today, 2018 terms, that's about $35,000. And I was a part of one of these large Christian cooperative groups that have sprung up, and I just intensely dislike the idea of my bills having to be shared by my Christian brothers and sisters at an outrageous rate.
Yeah.
So I called the hospital, called the surgeon, called the labs, the MRIs, everybody, and basically said, I'm essentially a cash payer, and this seems completely inappropriate.
Yeah.
And to my amazement, everybody just folded.
Wow.
And that was the germination of the idea that has led to the Caris Group subsequently, and then 4 years ago to Sedera as well. I could have never imagined that would lead to helping with billions of dollars of medical bills for people and coming to where we are now, actually trying to change the whole way that healthcare is paid for. Medical pricing has to be dug into to be believed, because seeing it, you won't believe it. It's unbelievable. When you dig into it, you begin to find out how much is wrong with the system and why we really have to tackle the system right at its core in all sorts of ways, so that we can bring rationality in an economic sense, and to be honest, so that we can recreate the doctor-patient relationship, which is extremely important to me. I'm finding out is important to the vast majority of doctors as they begin to understand what's going wrong in the American healthcare system.
So we're chatting about the formation of the second company you started here, Sedera. Tell me more about what that's up to right now.
Sedera looks at these things, and we say there's a completely different way of handling that. We're not inserting ourselves in between the patient and the doctor, or the patient and the medical provider, the facility, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
What we do is we facilitate how that money can move from A to B. In a sense, we've got a sophisticated but different crowdfunding way of looking at what's going on with no promises, but with phenomenal results. The background that we touched a bit on the drive here was my experience of working with the Christian Healthcare Sharing Ministries, and they were doing a remarkably good job at about half the price that was going on in the insurance world. Now, there are reasons. It's not exactly comparing apples to apples, but I'm very impressed with what I see going on in those ministries. And so I really wanted to figure out how to bring that methodology, the whole idea of sharing. Could a similar concept, which is very close to what the Christian sharing ministries are doing, work where people on a large scale or companies on a large scale recognize that there would be ways to cooperatively share, but on a voluntary basis? So if we're serious about tackling medical costs, one of the things we have to start thinking about is we do not have a health system. We have a sickness system, and the system itself has become sick and encourages sickness.
Yeah.
Instead, we need a health system that drives people towards health.
Yeah.
Very different story.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's all about sticking Band-Aids on things when they happen. So tell me about that shift from sickness-based healthcare to healthy living-based healthcare.
From the physician end, which of course I'm very interested in with my background, there's a movement across the country gaining speed at a remarkable rate called direct primary care. These are membership-based family doctor practices where the doctor, instead of needing to look after, say, 3,000 patients, maybe looks after 500.
Yeah.
But they charge them on a membership basis. Now, Sadira is at the other end of the spectrum. If we can bring the consumer and the provider together again on the basis of cash, it makes a huge difference. So, I mean, right here in Austin, you can pay $3,000 for an MRI, or you can pay $350 or $400. And the difference is not the quality of the service you're given, but who is controlling the whole of the payment structure.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we need to bring that rationalization in. So the providers and patients coming together, with cash being king, does a huge amount to move towards real transparency.
Wow, yeah.
Okay, on the flip side of that, you've got to look at the role of the insurance companies. Now, insurance as a concept is fantastic. We insure against catastrophic events that are unlikely to happen. But that's not what health insurance is anymore. In fact, many of us feel that health insurance isn't insurance. And it's become an extremely expensive way of prepaying for an event that we know will happen.
Anytime, even in the midst of the turmoil of what people are feeling around our healthcare system currently, on both sides of the aisle, there's still an adverseness to change that so many people sort of feel when it comes to something that's so big. Tell me about some of the struggle of trying to grow something that's so foreign to people.
I think part of the role of the entrepreneur is to see things that don't exist and to begin to redefine what's possible. And the truth is, when you start looking, there's normally a way to do something. You really have to do whatever it takes.
Yep.
There's actually a very interesting verse in the book of Proverbs in the Bible that says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And I would say that if you dare think, you dare believe, then you can make it happen.
That's at the heart of anyone who feels the true burden and joy of entrepreneurship. When you're starting Sadira and you're in that place of, I think this could work, but I'm going to have to throw in years of our time, $1 million into R&D to even find out if this is going to work. Talk to me about your mindset.
You know, I don't know if I would have had the courage if I had known how difficult it was going to be. Maybe that's somewhere where my natural stubbornness really came to my rescue. If something's worth doing, then it's worth the pain and the effort and the cost, and that's just part of the price tag. Price tag. Price tag. Price tag. And what one learns as you move into the investing side of the journey is ideas are literally a dime a dozen. You know, if you talk to a VC firm, they're seeing 3, 4, 5, 10 ideas a week, a day maybe.
Yeah.
And they're trying to sort through not so much the idea, although of course that's critical. They're really looking at the character of the entrepreneur. And I do think that's critical. I would certainly encourage those who are watching what you're producing from the entrepreneur side to be saying, if I'm not willing to give everything that I've got, why on earth would I ask anyone else to give anything, let alone everything? If your next meal depends on whether you're delivering anything, then you're going to do everything you know how. There'll be no 9-to-5 mentality about that. The entrepreneur's journey is not an easy one, but it's incredibly valuable. I've always, right from the start of any businesses I've been involved in starting, been looking for people who are better than me. Don't be defensive. Don't worry that they know how to do it better. Love that.
Yeah.
Because when you bring people who are better on board quickly, that frees you to do what you're honestly good at, which may be having the ideas, being willing to take the risk.
When I'm reading, there's a combination of both ideas that are sparked, formation that happens in me, and creativity. And so it's not necessarily they talked about this specific tactic that I could put into practice, but the story of how they put that thing into practice sparked some sort of imagination in myself. That reading a book, that spending time in a conversation with someone who you respect and admire and grows you in countless ways.
Yeah, Jordan, I love the way you put that other people's ideas and approaches spark the creativity. Coming from the perspective I do, I think that creativity is something that God puts inside each of us if we'll learn how to nurture and grow it.
Yeah.
At least in essence, something of that spark is there inside each one of us, but we can cultivate it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing. You mentioned that, an idea here jots a thought over here. We all know that, honestly, there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
With all the billions of people out there, someone has thought about this, but usually only 1 or 2 people have said, then I'm going to try to do it.
Absolutely. So I'm always interested in the constant dreaming that we're doing as entrepreneurs. What has you dreaming these days?
Sudhir obviously is taking the bulk of my time at the moment, and it's just in the earliest stages of the classic sort of business going up the hockey stick. So the next year or 2, I would say, are really critical to what we do. Because many businesses fail when they're growing the fastest. I'd estimate that we're growing at about 10% a month at the moment.
Wow.
And
most companies would be thrilled at that in a year.
Absolutely. And so when you compound that on a monthly basis, that has a huge impact on where you are from the beginning to an end of a year. And the sort of advanced planning, anything from facilities to IT to staffing.
As the company grows at such a rapid pace, it sounds like a full-time job just recruiting and hiring people to manage all this. What does that side of things look like? Holding on to the core DNA as you're having to hire people on a never-ending basis to be able to keep up the kind of the service that you provide.
That really is a great question. And especially when there's strong service elements of what we do. I think it comes back that in your hiring, you need a clear view of what you're trying to accomplish. The first person I hired him to become the CEO. So we're a tiny startup. It's me with my ideas.
Yeah.
And into those ideas, I basically said, I need someone who's going to be a better CEO than I am. But finding someone who understands this niche world, it's going to take them some time to learn it. So I looked for someone who had the humility to work under my leadership, but the ambition and the smarts that I had confidence right from the start that within the first 4 years I'd be ready to hand over to him as the CEO. And in fact, I handed over at the end of 3 years because he was doing such a great job. And man, I've never regretted that. Jamie Lagarde came with an impeccable background. He let go of his own sort of company, what he was running as a startup, because he felt this was a bigger idea. And he wanted to put his life into a bigger idea. Someone who'll let go of what they've got because they believe you have a bigger idea to which they want to attach themselves.
Yeah.
That sort of vision and drive. And I would say...
And the humility you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely am not of the persuasion that the role of the CEO or even of a company generally is to promote shareholder value exclusively. I think that's an incredibly narrow way of looking at things. And I think there's strong evidence in the sort of economic world that actually companies like ours that are really clear on their social and values purpose, they do really well economically, and that you end up giving a much better return to your investors.
You're so passionate about your work. It's a call on your life that doesn't end at a certain age.
Maybe a couple of thoughts that I would leave with the aspiring entrepreneur. Don't ever forget that your family comes first. Absolutely, we have to learn how to do the hard work. Sometimes you do whatever it takes, but not all the time. And if you're not clear that family comes first, then you will end up putting them second or third. I would say make sure that your wife is the most important person in your life. And the way that most wives identify love is time. So have time. Make sure there's time in the busiest of times built into your wife. Secondly, I'd just emphasize love your team, build them up. That company is nothing without that team. You cannot do it all on your own. So anything you can do to give credit where credit is due will come back to bless you.
Wise words, friends.
Y'all for watching that. I also want to introduce my good friend Tony Dale. You've got a good introduction to him there, so you're familiar with what he does. But an incredible story of this man who's become a good friend and mentor of mine. In addition to being a pioneer in healthcare industry, he's also really kind of him and his wife, the pioneers of the house church movement in the United States. That's a whole nother story I would love to tell at some point on film, but just a remarkable man. So welcome, Tony Dale. Cool. So I would love any questions that you have. I would love to have you dive deeper into questions that you have for Tony. If you do have any filmmaking questions, happy to answer those as well. But I think this is also just a great time to learn about something that's so different, something that we're not used to. Typically it's you buy health insurance, and that's kind of the option. And so this is something that Tony is doing amazing work, and so I'd love to hear about your curiosity and have Tony be able to answer those questions as well. So Yeah.
So, taking this, I guess, a modification of the Christian cost share program, what types of companies, I guess, size companies do you work with whenever you are going in and talking to them about this type of model? Is there kind of like a minimum size or that it works best with, or maximum size?
Okay, that's a great question. I don't know if the questions have been caught, so just a brief recap on the question. What size companies do we work with? And you commented that what we've created is a modification of the Christian healthcare sharing ministries. Back in 2010, when the Affordable Care Act was passed, I'd already been working for, I guess, 17 or 18 years at that point with the Christian healthcare sharing ministries to help them have fair prices for their members, as was sort of mentioned in the video. And so I'd negotiated, or my team, had negotiated billions of dollars of medical bills, and we really got an inside look at what was going on. And then I saw this exemption for the Christian groups, so that the Affordable Care Act said that those who belong to one of these ministries would not be penalized if they did not have insurance, because the law said that everybody had to have health insurance. But as I looked at the exemption, I realized it was really a double-edged sword. Yes, it exempted members of these ministries, and it allowed these ministries to continue to grow, but it severely limited the ministries. It said this is only available to the faith-based community, and in fact it didn't. It sort of said it's available to faith, like it might be open to people of other faiths or that type of thing. But it also restricted, and it said if the ministry wasn't already in existence before the Affordable Care Act came into place, then no new ministries were allowed to form. So essentially, this was just limited to those of us who would view ourselves as strong evangelical Christians. And I thought this is completely wrong. Something that is called an Affordable Care Act is taking one thing, which is half the cost of health insurance, and pushing it off in a corner and saying, oh, it's only for those Christians who are kind of fanatical about their faith, and everybody else has to go into the insurance world. So as I sort of looked into that and prayed into it, I just really felt, Lord, there has to be a way that we can bring, if you like, Christian truth out into the marketplace and say there's actually a better way of doing things. And so, 2 or 3 years of R&D to figure out what was going to be necessary, and I saw that in that legal framework of the Affordable Care Act, that the only way to deal with the penalties of the law, at that time, it's changed now, but at that time, the only way to deal with it was to work only with groups and only in the insurance space that would allow a group to take care of the penalties. And the idea which the Lord gave, and I want to give him all the glory, because although the idea is not rocket science, you do have to have insight that comes. And in that sort of moment of inspiration, I saw that the penalties were all attached in the law to preventative care, which is described in the law as minimum essential coverage. And I said to myself, preventative care is like 5% of premium cost. So if we work with companies in a self-insurer framework, and I didn't know then whether it would be small or larger companies or whatever, if we help them deal with the law through a little slither of self-insurance, then we could actually help them deal with the cost of medical bills in this medical cost-sharing methodology, but completely outside of the insurance framework. Because the courts have already said that the Christian healthcare sharing methodology is not insurance. So over here, a little slither of insurance to take care of the law. Over here, a methodology based on the Word of God, but in today's economy, I'd more typically describe it as part of the sharing economy. If you wanted to think of it in terms of, an Uber approach to healthcare, where we take the surplus that people and companies have, and we learn how to share those who have the resources with those who need the resources at any given time, and the outcome is paying for the large medical bills. So we actually, as our sweet spot, work mainly with small companies because that's still easier within the framework of the law. But it's now begun growing so fast that larger companies are looking at what we're doing, and we're also working with groups and associations.
Thank you so much for being here. Amos, thanks for putting this together. I'm beginning to see why this group is here on Creative University Week here, because this combination of entrepreneurship, social action, and new media development is just brilliant. And so I congratulate you. And I want to learn more from you on this. We have a number of educators here and students. And my question is this. What insight would you give us? What advice would you give us in the use of technology, particularly new media, to advance political and social change? How can we teach better? How can we educate better and learn better to do what you've done here, which is to meld, as I see it, new media technology with entrepreneurship ideas for improving society? What advice would you give us as an educational organization?
Yeah, I think that it is. There's an Australian philosopher by the name of Ivan Illich who was asked a question of how do you change society? Is it by violent overthrow or by some sort of political action? And he said neither. You change society by telling an alternate story. And that is becoming more and more powerful through the medium of film. We've always told stories through ancient history on through today. Jesus himself was an incredible storyteller, which was so much of what drew the crowds, was his ability to tell a compelling story that shifted culture, that brought people to new ideas. And now we can do that through such a powerful medium of film and do it in such a way that we can do it to audiences of unlimited size. This is a new venture for me. We've been doing filmmaking primarily for weddings for the last decade or so. And about a year ago, I decided we're going to start trying some more unique things. And so this Film Mavericks venture is very much a new venture for us. And I wanted to do some testing because I believe so passionately in what Tony does. I think you've heard that in this piece. My wife and I have been doing a healthcare sharing ministry as our form of taking care of our needs and helping our Christian brothers and sisters for the last 7-8 years or so. That was a passionate deal for me. So when we started this series about entrepreneurship, Tony was at the very top of my list of people who I wanted to talk to. But I think you talked about kind of the technology for sharing and that sort of thing. It's incredible what sort of traction you can get just by putting these things online, even if you don't have an audience, for very minimal cost. So I was actually telling Tony at breakfast this morning, I put a small, like $100 ad in Google to try to get some views on this and help gain some traction for what we were doing and help send some people to Tony and tell that story. And for $100, I was able to get this in front of 11,000 people, which is crazy. And we actually did some other tests. This is sort of an interesting piece about telling a compelling story and doing it in an entertaining way. Is that we actually did an experiment with this where we placed part of our ad as a pre-roll advertisement. If you ever watch a YouTube video, you know there's a video that comes up first. After 5 seconds, you get the opportunity to skip it. Well, we did a test where we ran that as a pre-roll. This 20-minute film as a pre-roll advertisement. 35% of our audience that was trying to watch a different video and had an opportunity to skip after 5 seconds. 35% of them stayed and watched a 20-minute video. So it's amazing when you tell a compelling story and you do it in a creative way that engages people's senses. They'll stick around and watch a 20-minute film when they were trying to do something else. And so that's the power that we have at our fingertips for very little money, very little expenses. I mean, 10 years ago to get an audience of 11,000 people would be tremendously expensive. to be able to do that, for the cost of a date night with my wife is remarkable.
And I would add to that as well that I obviously have no idea what most of your backgrounds are. But God has gifted all of us in certain areas. So I happen to be a family doctor. I happen to come from England, so I've already watched the socialized system. I come over here and I begin to see equal challenges in a so-called private system. It's not private over here either. And into these situations that God puts us, I think it's really vital as Christians that we recognize the reality of what it says in Psalm 24, which is that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein, because he has established it. So that means when you see a challenge or a need in the particular area that God's given you interest in and you find yourself working in, maybe that's because God is going to also give you an answer to how that need can be met. And so for me, with a background in medicine, but then having been involved for those sort of 17, 18 years before the Affordable Care Act, helping the ministries, also helping insurance companies and others, helping private individuals get fair prices on their medical bills, which is crippling the country, then it becomes a natural area to pray into that and say, Lord, how can I do something that is actually meaningful to change this situation? And I think that's a huge challenge. I mean, in the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth. We're not waiting for pie in the sky. We're saying, Lord, put me to use right now so that I can do something that brings your kingdom. The kingdoms of this world shall become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign. What does that look like where you or I work?
Yeah.
Hello, Dr. Dale. I'm good that you're here to see you. But I have a question for you. So I'm also very happy you were able to take advantage of that faith-based loophole in the Affordable Care Act. But me and you both know that medical care in government is really dynamic right now. So I was just wondering, how do you plan to adapt your country, say that exemption gets more limited, or if changes occur? How do you have plans if such changes occur?
Okay, that's a great question around this area of how the Affordable Care Act limited, what goes on with the ministries only to people of faith. One of the main things which I think I would say actually offended me about the Affordable Care Act, and in a slight way also offended me about what the Christian ministries do, is that it's only available to Christians. In fact, the first time we were asked after we had started Severa, naturally the regulators, in our case, the Texas Department of Insurance, wants to know what you're doing and is it legit and how does it fit in the law. And they said to me, well, Tony, both the Affordable Care Act and Texas state law, which has a safe harbor law, which is rather like what's in the Affordable Care Act, say that this is only available to Christians. So why didn't you just shape what you do where it would only be available for Christians, because then you'd be protected by the law? And I said to them, well, I didn't do it that way because that's a really bad law. Why would Texas say that we protect Christians and we don't protect Muslims, or we don't protect Jews, or we don't protect people who aren't of faith at all? And if there's a good methodology, wouldn't we in a state like Texas that actually believes in a free market try and do something that became available to everybody? Now they also asked me the same question, the same safe harbor law said that you were supposed to be non-profit. And so, I again, when they asked me about why didn't we just do it in a non-profit, at least that would have made it easier for them to say, oh, you look like you fit under these exemptions that are already there. I said, we don't need to live in a world where we live under exemptions. Okay? The role of government is not to say that everything is illegal until we say it's legal. On the contrary, in a free society like this, everything is legal until the government says that it becomes illegal. And in fact, the courts, in many cases with the Christian healthcare sharing ministries, have said this is not insurance and it should not be a regulated field. And so, that was my answer to the regulators, that we have a freedom in our society to do things that are not prohibited by the law. We don't have to have permission before we set up our lemonade stand, unless you live in a weird city like Austin that might try and tell you that they even want to regulate kids who want to set up their lemonade stand. So for me, it was a fundamental premise of what I was trying to do, that we were bringing a working methodology that's already helping about 1.5 million people in this country have their health care at half the cost of what most everybody else pays. And we're going to bring it into the mainstream in such a way that the whole country can benefit from the experience of these Christian groups. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I would like to know how you would work in a catastrophic event.
I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing.
How would your system work in the event of a catastrophic event?
Okay, so the question is, how does this work when you're dealing with catastrophic events? And that's a really good question. It actually gets to the core of what insurance is supposed to be about. Okay, the classic sort of understanding of insurance, which again showed actually briefly in the video, is that you insure against things you don't expect to happen, but if they happen, they're going to have a catastrophic impact on your finances. So insurance is designed for if the roof blows off your house. Now you and I all pay insurance on our homes, and we're perfectly happy to never benefit from that insurance, because we're paying against something that we don't expect to happen. But if it does happen, a lot of people are sharing together through the insurance methodology so that you can afford to replace the roof. Okay, health insurance, so-called, has long since stopped being insurance. It's become a very, very expensive way to prepay for things that, generally speaking, we know are going to happen. And if we paid for oil changes in our cars the same way we paid for health insurance, it would probably cost us $500 to have an oil change, because we've unnecessarily made expensive handling the small stuff that we should be handling ourselves, so that we can also take care of the big stuff, and we've corrupted what health insurance really is. So the secret to making sure that you can really take care of the big stuff is twofold. First of all, you need large numbers of people. Okay, and then secondly, you need to teach people personal responsibility. We actually, in terms of what we do, we describe it on 3 basic core tenets. The first is that believing that all truth is God's truth, we are open about the fact that Christ is at the center of our plan. That, when you give him the preeminence, everything else falls into place. Okay, secondly, you need a community. You need the large numbers of people who are committed to sharing with each other. And thirdly, for community to work, you need personal responsibility. I need to care that if I go and have my MRI and it costs me $3,500, when I could have gone across the road and had it for $350, that I am now damaging the community. Okay, so how does it work? Well, you look at the ministry, they're sharing, more than $1 billion a year now in medical bills. It works incredibly. The Caris Group, our first company, helps the ministries negotiate those big bills. If I told you that the typical $1 million bill, which is not that unusual nowadays in the medical world, you can probably negotiate down below $250,000. So, what that's telling you is they were charging you 4 times too much. Not just that they're being really nice. And even what I just said about the MRIs tells you that there might be 1,000% difference, a 10-fold cost difference between a fair price and the price that people are being charged. And so how do you handle the big bills? You have large numbers of people who are voluntarily engaged, and we have no difficulty handling the big bills and making sure that the doctors and hospitals and others are paid a fair price. Not a gouging price, but a fair price, so that they can also do their work, which is vital, and make the profits that they need to be able to serve the communities they serve.
Jordan, would you mind telling us about your vision for this film? Why did you do it? How did you do it? And reflections on that process.
Yeah, so as this kind of started out with my wedding company. I grew what's now the largest wedding film company in Texas. And so I have 12 people who are part of my team, and I was able to grow that business in such a way that it more or less runs itself now. I was telling Tony on the way over here, I probably spend 2 to 5 hours a week on my wedding company, keeping that going, and otherwise it runs itself. So that freed me up to be able to do something different, new, and exciting, which I'm always about. And so about a year ago, I started my new company, Film Mavericks, and I wanted to find a way to do something exciting that we were passionate about that would also help give us visibility in the marketplace in Austin. And so we began this project, which is essentially a web series that we created on the YouTube platform. And so Tony is not the only person that we made one of these films about. We've made 10 of them. And they tell the stories of different entrepreneurs who are doing innovative things in their industry. And so it's about me connecting with other entrepreneurs in a way that builds a relationship of trust, but grows where other entrepreneurs would be interested in this, whether or not they're in the healthcare industry, because they have something valuable to learn from Tony and how he's grown these amazing businesses, to be inspired and engaged. Like I said in the conversation about learning from other books or conversations with people, there's tremendous value for entrepreneurs to learn from other entrepreneurs. And so I saw this as a way to do that, and also to connect with, to connect with my friend again. It's great to have an excuse to spend 3 hours together talking to be able to make this piece, and also honestly to continue to grow and expand my team's ability to be able to take on some bigger projects that I see us doing in the future. We just got done filming a short film that we're going to do on the HC basketball team. We all know their amazing Cinderella story. When I was here, they were lucky to scrub together 2 wins in a season, and now they've gotten to the biggest stage in the world. And so we're getting to tell those stories. Getting to tell a full feature-length documentary about Sally Gary, an amazing former professor here who started this amazing organization that works to support churches to help them know how to love and support the LGBT community better. These stories that we're passionate about, that we really want to push forward, and creating this project and others like it help to equip and grow my team in new ways that we will be able to take on some of those projects as well and be more equipped to do so. So that was there's a lot of reasons why we did this, but that kind of sums it up.
So much.
How do we access creative via your organization? These videos?
So the Film Mavericks has a YouTube channel, and so they're all on our YouTube channel. That's where we access those. I think, I said we filmed about 10 of these. I think maybe seven or 8 of them are available right now, and a few more are being finished up. But yeah, there's several other amazing stories in there. Really innovative work. But obviously, Tony's was my favorite, and that's why I wanted to bring him here for this. So.